The plane crash in the USSR has been destroyed. On the 10th of July 1985, the Tu-154 aircraft of the Tashkent United Air Force was launched against the Ufa-Arkaly-Leningrad border. The flight time was determined at 18.45, but the crew arrived at 18.18 on this aircraft 18 and the flight time was 23.00. At this time, the weather temperature in the opposite city of Uzbekistan dropped to 33 degrees. The details of the events after being taken to the air, the crew took off for a 5-kilometer flight. The autopilot was set to fly as fast as possible, but at 11,600 meters, the plane was flying at a speed of 400 kilometers per hour. To speed up a little, the commander moved the autopilot to a distance from 70 meters and then pulled it to the side. As a result, the ship was destroyed. The light attack signalized the ship. The airship began to float. The automatic landing gear was disengaged and the ship was moved away from the ship. The speed was 390 kilometers per hour. At this time, the engine needed full gas to pass through the exit. But the crew accepted the fact that the plane was not same plane and the aircraft was in a state of a slight attack. The warning of the attack was slow, but the enemy was also strong. The speed dropped to 380 kilometers per hour. The crew spread their noses. The speed was 330 kilometers per hour. The crew, who were used to it, also slowed down. The plane responded with a loud. The plane was moving at 3 o'clock. The 311, what is the situation? 311, the engine has been launched. 311, launch the engine. 311, the engine has been launched. Launched, Commander. 311, launch the engine. Answer me, who did this? 311, the pilot is in position. The plane is in a state of emergency. Do not make any more efforts. The crew has launched unorganized. Do not make any more efforts. The crew was working on the interceptors and the pilot helper engine was all well and good. After 3 kilometers of flight, the crew managed to fly the plane to the top of the heli. But the engine was not working properly. The plane was blown to pieces by sands and was blown up into pieces. When the plane was found, no one was safe. As a result of the unfortunate incident, 200 people were killed. This is the most serious air disaster in the history of Soviet aviation in the USSR. Vladimir Meshik was a flight disaster in the USSR borders was declared. Vladimir Meshik, a student of the USSR, said, in July 1972, in the Sinovac, I could not believe it. I did not believe it. Then the plane started to take off. It passed 75 meters per second in vertical speed. The movement of the rudder and pedals helped to see the track. Then a parachute was opened against the parachute. After that, the plane passed through the nose, speed was increased, the landing was completed. After the situation was resolved, a parachute was placed against the aircraft. But the aircraft did not have a parachute against the aircraft. The T-114, which was at the border of the airspace, was in a state of extraordinary danger, as it was lifted up against the natural environment. The crew was at a speed of more than recommended, and at a speed of 400 kilometers per hour and 11,600 meters, the signalization was set to the speed of 2 meters. But the commander pushed it to the side. To get out of the landing mode, the crew continued to keep the speed and escape the landing. As a result, the plane destroyed 110 km per hour speed on a horizontal runway. The spiral magnet was broken and collapsed. This accident was due to our vitality. and 320 kilometers per hour was reached. The plane, which was the first to leave the runway after the full-scale landing, left the regime early. The plane was taken from the runway and requested special training from the pilots. The A320 aircraft, which is located at the flight limit of 2154, is not necessarily available for the pilots to fly out of the runway. The method of taking off from the runway is the same for all planes. The steering wheel is set to the maximum speed and the speedometer until it reaches the required speed. The engines are in a 3-stroke mode. In any case, the aircraft must be taken out of the situation with the help of a heli and a rudder. In this case, the possibility of their benefit is low. Therefore, neutral operation is necessary when the propeller and the steering wheel is taken out at the necessary speed. If there is a collision in the plane, it must be moved to the side. This is the reason for the delay of the landing from one side to the other side. The plane should not be moved from the landing at some time, because it is possible to get out of this collision and take the landing pad. It also needs to be taken out with minimal loading. Assistance. Knowing the basic conditions. After taking the plane out of the airport, approximately 300 meters of distance was lost. Vasily Kershaw, captain of Tu-154 in 1985, the counter-city airport of Uzbekistan was most useful. The crew was on the road to the desert, and the flight was not necessary because of the need to take a flight on it, and the flight was made to make it more convenient. For various reasons, the crew was gathered in the St. Petersburg Airport in Ullerton, because they could not stand still at a 40-degree temperature and in a single seat. After the break was made, the crew was taken to the airport and then the crew was taken to the airport. After the crew took the plane, the crew was taken to the airport. The crew slept for 10 minutes, as if they were sleeping in a dream. The autopilot was on the way, but the plane was in a state of emergency, and the speed was too fast. The speedometer did not have a warning sign. No one had ever put their nose on the plane to check the speed. The plane was 11,600 meters above sea level, and the landing gear was not enough for the plane to fly. There was no one to put the plane's nose a little closer to the ground to keep it in place. The plane was landed at 11,600 meters. I cannot even imagine how many times the maximum flight speed could have done this. After a few attempts to land at a certain altitude, the final result was that the liner destroyed the speed and the landing began. The signalization was done. The crew was asleep, but at first, the machine did not take off quickly, as the crew was already taking off. The captain heard the engine start and the whole plane shake. He could not imagine that his heart was beating so fast. It is possible that this is the result of the crash of the airflow. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The plane was shaking, as if it were shaking its head. The aircraft took off and lowered the speed. The flight engineer increased the speed, because there were no anti-aircraft gunners in front of it. The commander lowered the speed again. The plane took off and hit the aircraft. The aircraft took off again for a minute. The attack speed was reduced to 20 degrees. At this time, the speed was still 100 kilometers per hour and the plane fell. It was possible to land in the right position within seconds, because the last stop of the ship was the same. But the chaos was over. The aircraft began to move in a hurry and many movements were stopped. On the contrary, the heavy aircraft was hit by an impossible spiral summon and was taken to the hospital. I think they were in a very bad state. After 3 flights, 20 hours of walking on the island, the crew had to leave the airport and return to the airport, as the passengers who had left the airport had to go to the airport. And the air-to-air combat aircraft was not able to perform the usual heat treatment, attack speed and 2-engine combat power supply. The aircraft's spiralsman was unable to fly and the plane was hit by a bullet. The signalization process took 77 seconds from the moment the aircraft's spiralsman was about to fly. That is, the crew took off the 2-barrel gun from the fast speed. Commander Yaki, the flight engineer, did not accept the correct decision. In the event of a disaster that the incident was quickly overrun by the traditional judo, the crew made several requests for a long-range operation. The speed was lost, the plane was not take the lead. According to the general opinion, the Tu-154 plane was not a target of a parachute-free landing against a fast landing. Therefore, the pilots have decided not to put a road in this. Do you believe this is true? Are you not a pilot in planes? In general, are you afraid of a plane? Write your answers in the comments. If you like the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and download the Expert Media extension from our prepared materials from the links in the description. Thank you for watching. See you, friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. See you, friends.